Hi, welcome to What About It podcast. This is the second of two episodes, the first one being an audio, and my buddy didn't believe it was my voice, so here's the video, and the voice will match. Hopefully he believes me this go around. Anyway, this episode is pretty much about discomfort. Let me ask you, have any of you ever avoided a conversation because you knew it was going to be an uncomfortable one, and later realized by doing so and by avoiding it only made matters worse? Maybe it was with somebody that you worked with, or a family friend, or a spouse, or one of your kids. Sometimes the moment we avoid the most is the one that happens to have the lesson waiting inside of it. And sometimes all it takes is just one honest question, certainly asked at the right time and the right way. And it could very well likely change everything. I'm Clement, your podcast host, and welcome back to the Chime In Nation. Shout out to Eddie Hazel for the intro music called What About It, very fitting. Chime In Nation is the heartbeat of this podcast. It's not really just about people listening. It's a community willing to talk about things most of us usually try to avoid or keep to ourselves, which is not very healthy. Questions we don't always ask. Certainly situations that sit with us a lot longer than we care to admit. This podcast is not meant to be the one-way conversation. Some of the most meaningful episodes will come from the experiences, the questions, the stories shared by those who chose to chime in. And that's why it's called Chime In. Because sometimes the most important thing that you can do is simply participate. And for that, I want to say thank you, Chime In Nation, for doing so. In the first episode, we talked about something most of us do without even realizing it. We spend a lot of time living in yesterday or worrying about tomorrow. I'll have to tell you, but I'm present, and I want to thank you for allowing me to be present, because I don't care about a minute that happened to go or a minute that has yet to happen. We spend a lot of our time living in yesterday or worrying about tomorrow. And sometimes in between, we miss the only place life really actually happens, and that's today. Once you start paying attention to today, something else begins to show up. Moments that are uncomfortable. Situations that don't sit right. Certainly didn't know of, existed, or coming our way. Conversations we know we probably need to have, but would rather avoid. Most of us deal with those moments in the similar way. We postpone them. We step around them. We convince ourselves to deal with them later, when things calm down a little bit, when the timing is better. Or we hope it will somehow fix itself. But the uncomfortable moment we avoid usually doesn't disappear. It waits, festers, and often grows while we're busy trying to deal with it in a different way by not dealing with it. If you can sit in the discomfort long enough to understand it, you could very well never discover what's really inside it. And some things feel very uncomfortable isn't the problem at all. Sometimes it's just a signal, a nudge, pointing you toward the real bloody problem. And just for whatever reason, ignoring it. Think about something simple. Think about your child missing curfew and coming home late. Most parents, like the rule was broken. So the reaction pretty much is immediate. Punishment, go to your room, you got to do the lawn 3 times, you're grounded for a week, give me your phone. On the surface, those consequences make sense. Well, they did, at least to me. Oh, while regretfully, I realized what an ass I was at times. But if the real issue isn't the time on the clock, what happens if the real issue is trust? Did you ask yourself why they were late, or ask them for that matter? Did you listen to their answer? Or did you hear the answer? Or even worse, did you believe it? Because the moment of doubt enters in that room or in that space, that conversation just got a lot more challenging. It's no longer about time. It's about trust, which wears on that relationship between the two of you. Does that sound familiar? The discipline happens, the child walks into the room, the door closes or it slams, a few words are said under her breath or maybe even out loud, or his. That's the uncomfortable moment. It's likely it's easier to enforce the rule than it is to sit in that moment and ask another question. That's when something else enters, and it's called grit, which happens to be the brand. And grit by itself isn't being tough. It's not pretending nothing bothers you, because that's a bunch of bullshit. Grit is doing the hard thing when the moment calls for it. Sometimes the hard thing is just asking one more friggin' question. Sometimes the hard thing is listening longer than you initially planned. Sometimes the hard thing is admitting that you may not have the whole friggin' story. And sometimes the hard thing is knocking on that damn door and walking something back. Because the truth is, we don't always get it right the first time. I know I didn't. I didn't realize that at the time. We react emotionally. That's why they call it a friggin' monkey brain. We fill in the blanks with the assumptions, the fears, the friggin' what ifs. Who was that new boyfriend? Did he keep her out on late? What the hell was she doing that she missed curfew? Or he missed curfew? Walking something back takes humility, eating crow, saying I fucked up, I'm sorry. But it builds something more important than just simply I'm sorry. It actually speaks to the other person and let them know that understanding the truth matters more to you than simply being right. Maybe not at the time. When you sit in those uncomfortable moments long enough, something interesting happens. You start hearing things differently, or more frequently, or at least paying attention. You start noticing the little signals that something deeper needs to be attended to. I call those whispers. They're quiet. Certainly easy to ignore or miss. Life moves way too fast. Reactions happen quickly, hence the monkey brain. So it's easier to move forward than it is to slow down and listen. Just yesterday, a young woman joined a conversation about an alignment, which is something that I've always loved and held my understanding and belief to. She used the word that I never heard before. Kismet. Of course, not knowing, later looked it up. It means fate, not coincidence, not happenstance. Something else that I believe in a lot. Hence, Listening to the Whispers is a book that I wrote. Something meant to cross your path. And every once in a while, if you're paying attention to those whispers, life puts something in front of you that feels exactly like that. So be aware of Kismet. But if you ignore those whispers long enough, life usually finds a louder way to get your attention. Sometimes that louder moment shows up in relationships, and you never know when that's going to happen. It could be at a friggin' restaurant. Sometimes between friends, sometimes in family. I know that because I lived it a couple of times. There was a time when my daughter and I became very estranged. We didn't speak, I think, for 2.5 years. Could have very well been much longer than that. Looking back, the hardest thing to admit is that I actually played a role in that distance. And I'm not talking about because I live in Florida and she's in Edmonton. I'm contacting about the distance of conversation, hugs, and listening. I didn't listen the way I should have. I believed the bullshit story I created in my own mind instead of understanding what actually happened. And that misunderstanding created distance. A lot of pain, real distance. Time obviously passed, and the longer it went, it was harder that I felt to walk it back. God knows I tried on more than one occasion, but eventually something changed. And it's not because of me. It's absolutely because of my daughter. For that I'm grateful for and very proud of. When the truth surfaced, something remarkable happened. All that distance disappeared in seconds. Because the truth was understood, when it was misunderstood, that misunderstanding lost all of its power. All of it. Today I'm grateful to say that my daughter and I have a closer relationship than ever. At least I think so. I better ask her that question. Turns out she's a chip off the old block. Something that I'm truly proud of. And this is the hard part. If I'm being honest, I managed to find myself in a similar situation again. A dumbass. 20 friggin' years later with my son. After 4 years in the Marines, one of the worst 4 years and longest 4 years ever, I worried about him every day. Different damn story, same friggin' lesson. Assumptions created distance. Not knowing created distance. Not believing created distance. Making excuses. Thank God he has a couple of boys now, and I think he's starting to understand why his father could have been such a pain in the ass. Anyway, that's the conversation we'll have another day, a father and son episode, one after my daughter and I have one. Because sometimes the uncomfortable moment we avoid the most is the one with a lesson inside it, as I mentioned earlier. And maybe I need that friggin' lesson again and again. Well, I don't plan on having any more children anytime soon, so I'm safe there. But it still doesn't mean that you don't have to ask the honest question at the right time and place to change everything. If something within this episode resonated with you, that's where Chime In Nation comes in. Be a part of this nation family. Share a situation, share a question, share something you're trying to understand. Perhaps you have something uncomfortable that you need to deal with. Be glad to communicate, glad to connect. because sometimes the story you share becomes the whisper someone else needed to hear. That's a pretty good feeling, knowing that you've helped somebody else because of your resolve. So I'll leave you with this. If there's something in your life right now that you've been avoiding because it feels uncomfortable, what might happen if you sat in that moment long enough to understand it? Let us know. What about it? In the meantime, be kind. And thank you for listening.